The scream came up from the river, and by the time the Duke of Wickmere reached the bank his son was already gone under the brown water, and a woman he had never seen in his life was tearing off her cloak to go in after him. Ferran, Duke of Wickmere, was a man the whole county had learned to fear cold, exact, unsmiling, a widower who had buried his wife and every soft thing in himself along with her, and who ruled his lands and his household by a silence that made grown stewards flinch. He had come down to the water only because his heir, motherless and reckless and forever escaping his tutors, had begged to see the spring flood, and Ferran had granted it the way he granted everything now, coldly, from a distance, without touching. He had been 20 paces off, speaking sharply to the boy's tutor about vigilance, when the bank gave way beneath small feet and the flood took his only child. He was still 20 paces off. He would not reach the bank in time. He knew it with a horror that stopped his heart, and he had time to understand, in that frozen instant, that he was about to watch the last living thing he loved be carried away while he stood too far off in his fine boots to save it. And then the woman went into the river. She did not hesitate. She had been walking the towpath with a basket of eggs, a plain young woman in a gray dress, no one, a stranger, and she flung the basket down and the cloak after it, and threw herself into the raging brown water without a breath of pause, the way a person moves who has decided a thing before she has finished thinking it. The flood took her too. Ferran reached the bank at last and saw them both, small dark heads in a wide roaring brown flood that had drowned stronger swimmers than any woman in a sodden dress. He was shouting, he did not know what. He tore off his coat, and he saw the woman fight the current with a fury he would not have believed, driving herself sidewise across the pull of it, reaching, missing, reaching again, and catching at last a fistful of his son's collar as the boy went down a second time. She could not swim them both to the near bank against that flood. Ferran saw her understand it and change her whole aim in an instant. She stopped fighting the river and used it, letting it carry them downstream toward the great fallen willow whose roots still gripped the far bank, and she got one arm over a submerged branch and hauled the boy up against her chest and held on, held on, held on, while the whole weight of the spring flood tried to tear them loose. Ferran went along the bank at a dead run, past caring for his dignity or his boots or his life. He waded out along the willow's trunk where it lay half in the water, hooked his own legs over the roots, and reached, and her hand met his, cold and slipping and desperate, and he took his son from her arms across the roaring gap and dragged the small sodden weight to himself and up onto the trunk, and then reached back for the woman. For one terrible moment the flood nearly had her. Her strength was spent, her grip was failing. He saw it in her white face. He locked his hand around her wrist and would not let it go, and hauled with everything in him, and brought her up out of the river onto the fallen willow, and the three of them lay tangled and gasping on the wet bark while the flood roared on beneath, cheated. His son was breathing, coughing, weeping, terrified but breathing, small hands fisted in his father's ruined shirt. Ferran held him and could not speak. He had not held the boy in a year. He had ruled him from across rooms coldly, as he ruled everything. Now he held him as though he would never do anything else, and over the wet dark head he looked at the woman who had gone into the flood for a stranger's child. She was on her hands and knees on the trunk, coughing river water, her gray dress black with wet, her hair torn loose and streaming, her lips blue. And when she had breath she did not ask who they were, or whether there would be a reward or anything a person might reasonably ask. She crawled the length of the slick trunk to the boy and put her cold hand to his cheek and said, through chattering teeth, "There now, there, you are safe. You are safe, my brave one, breathe slow there, you did well to hold on to me. You did so well." And the feared Duke of Wickmere, who had not wept since he buried his wife, who had made a whole county afraid of his cold, dry eyes, felt something break open in his chest that he had thought sealed for good. They got to the near bank. Servants came running at last, and blankets and a carriage. The woman, having seen the boy wrapped and breathing and safe, tried simply to gather her sodden basket and go, as though she had done nothing more remarkable than return a dropped glove. Ferran caught her arm. It was the second time he had taken hold of her wrist, and this time it was not to save her from drowning. "You will not walk away," he said. His voice, that whole county feared, came out unsteady. "Do you know what you have done? Do you know whose child that is?" "A child who was drowning," she said simply. Her teeth were still chattering. "That was all I needed to know, sir. Any soul on that bank would have gone in." "No soul on that bank went in but you. I was on that bank. His tutor was on that bank. Grown men, and none of us moved fast enough, and a woman with a basket of eggs threw herself into a spring flood for a boy she had never seen. He was gripping her wrist as though she might yet be swept away. That is my son, my only child. His mother is dead, and he is all I have in the world, and I stood 20 paces off and could not save him, and you did. You will not walk away as though it were nothing. What is your name?" "Catherine Dunmore, sir. I keep hens on the Marsh Road." She looked, if anything, embarrassed by the whole of his attention. "And it was not nothing to me either. But it is done, and the child is safe, and I am very wet, and you are a great gentleman with no need of an eggwoman dripping on your gravel. Let me go home before I take a chill and think no more of it." He did not let her go home to think no more of it. He put her in his own carriage, over her protest, and wrapped his own dry coat about her, and brought her to Wickmere, and had the housekeeper build up a fire and find her dry clothes. And he sat by his son's bed the whole of that night, holding the small hand, and understood by morning that the two people who had come out of the river had cracked something open in him that would not close again. Catherine Dunmore did not want to be a heroine. That was the thing that undid him over the following weeks, for he found he could not simply thank her and be done. He sent a purse. She returned it, with a plain civil note that it had been no more than any Christian would do, and she wanted no payment for a child's life. He sent his steward to see her hens improved and her cottage mended. She permitted the mending, sternly, only because the roof did truly leak, and made the steward take back the rest. She did not court his gratitude. She did not angle for his notice. She had gone into a flood for his son and asked for nothing, and wanted nothing, and the more she wanted nothing, the more the cold Duke of Wickmere found he could think of little else. He began to call at the cottage on the Marsh Road. He told himself, at first, that it was to see that the boy's rescuer did well, and then he told himself nothing at all because it was no longer true. He came because Catherine Dunmore spoke to him plainly, without fear, as no one in the county dared, because she had seen him at the worst and most helpless moment of his life, wet and shouting and terrified on a river bank, and having seen him so, she was not afraid of the cold Duke the way the rest of the world was afraid. She scolded him, gently, for the way he held his son at arm's length. "A child that nearly drowned does not need a distant lord," she told him. "He needs a father who will hold him. You held him on that willow. Do not let go of him now that you are dry." And Farrand, who had let no one instruct him in a decade, went home and took his son up onto his knee before the fire and did not put him down. His boy healed, and a strange thing happened at Wickmere which the servants marked and whispered of. The cold Duke grew warm. He smiled once and then again. He rode to the Marsh Road so often that the whole county knew of it, and the county's tongues wagged that the feared Duke of Wickmere had lost his heart to an eggwoman, and for once the county's tongues were exactly right. On a bright afternoon in early summer he came to the cottage and found Catherine in her small garden among the hens, and he did not dismount and make polite talk as he usually did. He got down and stood before her and said what he had come to say. "Miss Dunmore, Catherine, I'm a cold man. The whole county will tell you so, and until a spring morning by the river they would have been right. I buried my wife, and I buried everything soft in myself along with her, and I ruled my son and my lands from behind a wall I thought would last me to the grave." His voice was low and rough. "And then you went into a flood for a boy you had never met, and you crawled the length of a willow with your last strength to put your hand to his cheek and tell him he was brave, and you asked me for nothing, and would not take a penny, and were embarrassed to be thanked. And the wall I built came down. It has been coming down every day since, and I have stopped trying to hold it up." Catherine had gone very still among her hens. "Your Grace, you saved my son's life," he said. "That alone I could never repay, but that is not why I am standing in your garden. I'm standing here because I have fallen in love with the woman who did it, not out of gratitude, though God knows I am grateful, but because you are the bravest and plainest-hearted soul I have ever known, and you are not afraid of me, and I have been so long afraid of everything." He took her hand, work-roughened, warm, the hand that had gripped his across the roaring gap. "I know what I am. A cold duke, 12 years your elder, with a wounded boy and a fearsome name. And I know what you are, a woman who wants nothing from any of it, which is exactly why I dare to ask. Marry me, Catherine, not for rank, not for reward, not for anything but that my son and I have both been drowning for a great deal longer than one spring morning, and you are the one soul who reached in and would not let go." Catherine Dunmore looked up at the feared Duke of Wickmere, who was not looking at her with any coldness at all, and the plain, steady courage that had carried her into a flood did not fail her now. "I did not pull that boy from the river to catch his father," she said. "I want you to know it. I would have done it for any child and asked nothing and gone home to my hens." "I know," Farron said. "That is precisely why I am asking. A woman who would do it for anyone and want nothing is the only woman I could ever trust with everything." Her eyes filled. She looked at the great cold house on the hill, and at the great once-old man standing in her hen yard with his heart in his hands, and something in her plain, brave face gave way to a smile he had never seen there. "Then yes," she said, "for the boy whom I have loved since he held on to me in the water, and for you who I did not mean to love at all and could not help it once you stopped being afraid." A wet laugh. "Yes, your grace, come down off the hill and be warm. There is room by the fire for all three of us." He drew her to him there among the hens, in the bright, ordinary summer light, and held her as though she too had been pulled from a flood, which, in a manner of speaking, she had pulled them both. They were married before the summer was out, and the feared Duke of Wickmere became, to the county's endless astonishment, a warm man, a laughing man, a father who was never again seen to hold his son at arm's length. Catherine kept a few of her hens at Wickmere, over the gardener's despair, because she said a duchess who forgot where she came from was not worth the coronet. And on the anniversary of the flood each year, the three of them walked down together to the river Commer now, in high summer, glinting gold, and stood on the bank where a plain young woman had once thrown down a basket of eggs and gone in without a breath of hesitation. And the Duke would take his wife's hand, and look at his living, laughing son, and think that everything he loved in the world had come to him out of that brown water, carried to a cold man by the bravest heart he had ever known.